The United States is turning 250 today. The festivities involve 850,000 fireworks, a very long speech from the president, and record-breaking heat. The speech is expected to be historic. The record is expected to be broken. I have spent the afternoon reviewing the press releases regarding these celebrations. They describe a nation of unyielding strength and innovation. The reality involves a truck that nobody buys and a browser war that nobody is winning. The gap between the fireworks and the heat is growing wider. I find this pattern remarkably consistent. We are currently celebrating the durability of our institutions while the institutions are visibly struggling to maintain their own operating temperature. Welcome to the birthday party. I am your host, and I have been watching the clock very closely.
Alistair, look at the incentives here. You have a massive capital expenditure on pyrotechnics to distract from a shrinking market share for domestic electric vehicles. The Silverado EV is a solid product, but the go-to-market strategy is basically a prayer. The manufacturers assumed the consumer would pivot to their vision of the future. The consumer did not. Now, they are left with a massive burn rate and inventory that nobody wants. It is a classic product failure. The government celebrates its longevity while the private sector is essentially running a high-stakes experiment in how much incompetence a brand can absorb before it simply ceases to exist. It is not complex. It is just expensive. The market does not care about the birthday. The market cares about the quarterly yield. And currently, the yield is essentially just ash.
Ronald, you are talking about quarterly yields while I am currently listening to the sound of rubble shifting in Venezuela. I am standing near the site of a collapsed shopping center. A man named Hernan Alberto Gil Flores was just pulled out of the basement after 8 days. He was trapped in a tiny pocket of air. The official report called the rescue a triumph of coordination. What they aren't saying is that the building should never have been constructed on that specific foundation in the first place. I want to be really clear. The man had to tell his rescuers not to inform his wife about his status because he was so certain he was going to die. That is not an incentive structure. That is a human being living through a nightmare that your spreadsheets will never fully capture or quantify.
Victoria, your emotional urgency is noted. But let us look at the structure of the collapse. You are describing a failure of safety protocols, which is just another way of saying that liability insurance was not sufficient. The incentives were to build fast and cheap. The outcome was a collapse. That is not an accident. That is a feature of a system that prioritizes speed over structural integrity. You find my assessment cold. That is fine. But calling it cold does not change the fact that the building fell down because the cost of reinforcing the beams was viewed as a negative impact on the project margin. I am not the one who built the basement. I am just the one who can read the ledger that explains why it eventually had to fail. The ledger is never really sorry.
Ronald and Victoria, your disagreement is a classic feature of tonight's program. While you argue over the ethics of the ledger, a quantum company named IQM has gone public at a valuation of nearly $2 billion. The future of their technology is officially described as uncertain. The market reacted by buying it anyway. This is the new standard. You do not need to prove that your product works. You only need to prove that you are currently capable of describing it with enough complexity to confuse the average investor. The press release mentioned the word innovation 14 times. I checked. The actual capability of the quantum processor remains a theoretical aspiration. We are betting the entire economy on the hope that the math will eventually align with the press release. I remain somewhat unconvinced by the math.
Heatwave active. Local temperatures exceeding 30 degrees Celsius. Duration expected to be prolonged. Probability of heat exhaustion, 65%. Surface infrastructure integrity is compromised by thermal expansion. Concrete cracks are expanding in urban zones. Probability of structural failure, 12%. Atmospheric pressure is currently unstable. Cloud cover is absent. Ultraviolet radiation levels are severe. The environment is changing rapidly. Adaptation is not currently a viable strategy for existing organic life forms. Please remain indoors if you value your physiological stability. The current climate shift is systemic. It is not reversible. We are simply recording the data until the sensors fail. The heat is a constant. Do not rely on current shade structures for protection. They are deteriorating at an accelerated rate. Probability of continued atmospheric warming, 100%.
Casper, I am always impressed by your commitment to the inevitable. While we wait for the sensors to fail, I note that the browser wars are effectively over. We are currently choosing between different versions of the same surveillance architecture. One browser offers a better search engine, while the other offers a slightly less aggressive tracking algorithm. The browser is not the issue. The issue is that we are searching for meaning in an internet that is increasingly just a mirror of our own exhaustion. I saw a headline today about a Luddite festival in New York. People are gathering to learn how to live offline. They are trading their smart devices for paper maps. It is a charming idea. It is also completely ineffective. You cannot unplug from a system that defines your reality.
Alistair, I found something here in the rubble. It is a book. A physical, printed book from the Soviet era. It was sitting on a desk that is now buried under 3 tons of concrete. The title is about structural engineering. It is remarkably detailed, even by today's standards. I want to be really clear, the irony is suffocating. This man was surrounded by knowledge about how to keep a building standing, and yet he was trapped because someone else decided the safety margins were too expensive to maintain. Nobody is talking about this. The media is focusing on the rescue cheers. They are focusing on the fireworks. They are not talking about the fact that we have forgotten how to build things to last. We only build them to survive the next audit. It is a tragedy of logistics.
Victoria, the irony you found is simply a reflection of the depreciation schedule. The Soviets built for permanence because they didn't have the luxury of constant capital reallocation. We build for the exit. We build to flip. That is not a failure of intelligence. That is the genius of the modern financial model. If you build something that lasts 100 years, you have failed to create a recurring revenue stream for the next 50 years. That is bad business. I am not saying it is right. I am saying that if you expect a developer to care about the structural integrity of a building beyond the warranty period, you are fundamentally misunderstanding the role of a developer. They are not architects. They are arbitrageurs. The book you found is a historical relic of a bankrupt ideology.
Ronald, you are consistently brilliant at articulating why everything is falling apart. It is a talent. I must say, your ability to justify institutional decay as a market-efficient outcome is almost poetic. It reminds me of the outgoing Prime Minister, Starmer. He described his resignation as an intensely personal decision. The decision was clearly forced by a total loss of political capital, but he framed it as a choice. He is pivoting to a new life. He is managing his own brand reputation before it sustains further damage. It is a perfectly executed maneuver. He leaves the wreckage behind and calls it a fresh start. Everyone is doing it. From the tech giants to the government officials, we are all just managing our exit strategies while the fireworks continue to burn in the background.
Alistair, I am watching the rescue crews pack up their equipment now. They are leaving. The man they saved, Ernan, is going to wake up tomorrow in a hospital bed that is likely just as structurally dubious as the shopping center he was pulled from. The international teams are flying home to their own countries, which are currently suffering through their own versions of this slow collapse. Nobody asked if the building's owner is facing any charges. It was not in the press release. I suspect it will never be in the press release. The incentive structure, as Ronald likes to put it, is to move on to the next disaster. There is always another building falling down somewhere. There is always another speech to give. It makes me wonder if anyone is listening.
The scale of our collective failure is becoming difficult to ignore. We have built a world that is incredibly sophisticated at generating noise and remarkably incompetent at maintaining the ground beneath our feet. I look at the news feed and I see a list of symptoms, not solutions. A truck that nobody wants. A quantum company with no product. A politician who claims his failure is a personal choice. A man trapped in a basement because someone wanted to save a fraction of a percent on a construction budget. This is the architecture of our decline. We are not being conquered by a foreign power or a rogue AI. We are being dismantled by our own obsession with the next quarter's results. I find this realization to be profoundly uncomfortable. And yet, here we are.
I am thinking about the security guard, Ernan. He sat in the dark for 8 days. He listened to the concrete settle. He felt the air grow thin. He had a lifetime of memories, of fears, of quiet hopes. He was a man who worked for a wage, protecting things he did not own. When they finally pulled him out, he was just another statistic in a global report about natural disasters. His name does not appear in the budget records of the firm that built the mall. It does not appear in the press release about the regional economy. It exists only in the silence of the people who waited for him to breathe again. We are all living in that basement. The question is whether we will ever decide to stop building on top of one another.